I was sat at my laptop researching my next film, looking into a story that's old. Really old. One that survived for centuries before anybody ever wrote it down. And it got me thinking. I've got a world of information at my fingertips, and I still had to go looking for this story. So how did it make it across the centuries when most of the people carrying it couldn't look it up, they couldn't search for it, and they probably couldn't even read it? And if a story like that could survive then, what's changed now? Has the internet ruined stories? Or has it just changed the way we tell them? Humans are storytelling creatures. Story is how we explain things, it's how we remember things, and it's how we learn. It's how we pass on information. It's one of the main ways we make sense of the world around us. If somebody tells me there's a cave over there and the last bloke that went in got eaten by a bear, I don't need to go in after him just to check. The story has already done the job. Stories carry warnings, preserve memories, and often they tell us who we are. In a lot of ways, our survival depends on them. Story isn't just something we do on the side, it's one of the most fundamentally human things that we do. Give us a river, and we give it a goddess with the power over life and death. That hill over there, it was made by a giant. Woods have beings that can trick us into getting lost, and pools have spirits that can drag us in and drown us if we get too close to the edge. Story shapes who we are, how we fit in, and what happens to us. And it gives us memory, preserving important events long after the last witness is gone. Story, in fact, might be the oldest form of information technology that we have. Long before printing presses or broadcast towers or smartphones, people were already passing information through story. The medium has changed, but the instinct hasn't. And maybe that's why, even across cultures that never met, similar kind of stories keep appearing. Vengeful spirits, wild hunts, tricksters, monsters, and sacred places. Humans everywhere have the same fears and the same questions. The myths aren't identical, but they often rhyme with each other. Names change, settings change, details shift, but time and time again people arrive at the same recognisable kind of tale. But even if those broad patterns echo across the human experience, the local forms still matter. Because once a story takes root somewhere specific, it starts to reveal something about the people who tell it. Their landscape, their values, their fears, their sense of who they are and where they came from. The same broad kind of story can also mean very different things depending on where it takes root, because the devil is in the details. Once folklore becomes tied to a local memory or a local landscape, it stops being generic, it becomes rooted in a place and shaped by the people who are telling it. And that matters because history is also a form of storytelling. It's shaped by bias, by perspective, by what gets included and what gets left out, and ultimately by the lens through which we view it. We don't inherit the past directly. We inherit stories about the past. And those stories help form our identity. They shape how communities imagine their ancestors and their actions and their effect on the world that came after them. Folklore and mythology aren't just about old stories. They're about a people's relationship to itself. So if stories are important, then the way we carry them matters too. Because storytelling has never been separate from the technology that carries it. For most of human history, stories were carried through local oral tradition. Through memory, through repetition, and through ordinary people telling it in their own voice. Then technology started to change that. With writing, stories could be fixed more firmly, and with the printing press, they could be copied verbatim and spread further than ever before. Then in the 20th century, radio, film and television centralised storytelling even more. Stories could now travel faster, further, and to more people than ever, though often through institutions rather than directly between people. And now the internet has changed things again. In some ways, it's brought storytelling back into the hands of ordinary people. Anyone can now tell a story directly in their own voice, to their own audience, without waiting for a publisher or a broadcaster or some other gatekeeper to decide that it's relevant. And that's genuinely hopeful, but it's a double-edged sword. Modern media tends to favour speed and simplification and, more than anything, sensation. And under those conditions, older stories can get stripped of context and reduced down to their loudest, strangest or most instantly clickable parts. They become creepy trivia, hollow hooks, or clip farm fragments. And increasingly, they're being delivered in artificial voices that feel completely detached from any real place or person or understanding. They risk losing their nuance or their wider meaning, and potentially some of their humanity. So has the internet ruined stories? Not exactly. But I do think it's changed the conditions under which stories survive, and the way people understand them. And that matters, because even if we're not losing stories altogether, we may be losing some of the texture and depth that they once carried, the threads that tied them into something wider, often in the name of algorithmic success. They survive, but in flatter, more homogenised forms, versions with broader appeal and less flavour. And when that happens, something important goes missing along the way. Because a story is more than just information. The storyteller matters. Voice matters, doubt matters, emphasis matters, local knowledge matters, uncertainty matters. The sense that a story belongs to someone, somewhere, and didn't just appear, fully formed, completely packaged, frictionless out of the ether. And a story isn't just the words. Stories survive not just because they're recorded, but because somebody keeps choosing to tell them, to pass them on, to shape them, to care enough to carry them forward in a way that still feels recognisably human. So the internet hasn't killed stories. If anything, there are probably more stories than ever. But it has changed storytelling, and it's changed the speed of it, the scale of it, and the incentives around it, and sometimes the quality of what actually survives. So maybe the question isn't whether stories survive, maybe it's what kind of stories survive and in what form. No story has ever stayed fixed. Stories live because they're retold. They shift in different hands and in different places and in different times, and that's never really been the problem. The point was never to preserve them in perfect form. That was never going to be possible. The point is to keep them human. To keep them rooted in place, in memory and in voice, because stories are one of the ways that we remember the past, or how we make sense of the present, and how we work out who we are. And that's why I tell these stories. I could have run them through a text-to-speech bot and called it a day, but I've made the conscious choice to sit here and tell you these stories as an actual person. Of course, I use modern technology. I've got cameras and microphones, and the script is scrolling up on a screen in front of me right now. But I try and keep as much of the human element as I can. My thoughts make it into the script, my errors, my omissions, my god-awful sense of humour all become part of the retelling. And hopefully, in some small way, my humanity becomes part of why a story stays alive, and maybe encourages somebody else to pass it on. And if you've made it this far and you want to hear an actual story, then you're going to find one somewhere in one of the corners of this video.